superstars, welcome back to not only another episode of Word Up with Danny Katz, it is our first episode of 2023, and I am over the moon to be joined by meta time expert extraordinaire, Michael Wann. This is Michael's fourth time back on the show, and we dropped into genealogy, secret societies, what a post-conspiracy society looks like, and what our role in post-conspiracy society is. It was a super fun conversation. Buckle up, prepare to enjoy my rocking dialogue, my first interview of the year with Mr. Michael Wann.
Now I'm on mute.
He's here.
You would think after all of the Zoom events I've done, I would learn the techniques.
You would think, but you can always blame it on Mercury retrograde.
I don't, but I could.
Right. It feels like it's not. Do you ever blame Mercury retrograde for anything?
Never once in my life would I do that, but that's me. That's me. I blame that on user error completely. But it's also a sense of pride, because if I was really good at it, well, then I don't like what that looks like either. So I might actually be purposefully poor on Zoom just so I don't get acclimated to the new world, which is being laid out for us. How about that? That sounds good.
I totally respect that. And I think you and I talked about this like a long time ago, where I said, like, everything I do is just a little bit janky. Like, I don't want to raise the bar too high. So I think it's good to keep the microphone on mute a little bit. Got to throw in errors here and there.
Well, I mean, there are two ways. So there's one is you got to keep it like that to keep them always guessing, right? Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to predict all of our movements and thoughts as they're trying to feed it. Right. So there's that. And then there's also the fact is I don't want to get that good at Zoom.
I'm with you. I don't either.
All right. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good.
I know
lots of change, lots of movement.
Okay, catch us up to speed on this latest transitioning of Mr. Michael Wann.
Do we? I mean, I feel like I would can we walk? Let's ease into that. I'm not there's some people. Let me ask you this. I think this says a lot about an individual. There's some people who go to the edge of the pool and they'll just jump right in. And then there's some people who are really take their time. And then there's a third group of people who like to push the people who like to take their time in. And that could be that person could be either in both camps as well. So my question to you is what do you do at the pool?
I'm generally a jump in type. I would never push anyone because that's so wrong use of will. And my keyword for 2023 is easy, which also incorporates slow and languid and mosey and coasting and going with the flow. So if you want to take that capital M masculine and decide that we're going to slowly mosey our way into this conversation, I'm all game.
Okay, we'll do that. I definitely take my time in the cold water. There's certain things I jump right in, but water, I got to go slow. So
you never jump right in?
I mean, I've done it occasionally. I do it when I have done it when my pride and ability to put myself in an uncomfortable situation has been put on the line. And I do it out of spite, but never out of pure joy.
For me, I get a lot of times I'll get the feedback that I'm brave or courageous. And what that means for me is I don't like dealing with fear in my mind. So I want to get to the other side as quickly as possible. So if it's a 20-degree lake, I'm going to jump in first and quickly so that I don't have to mind fuck myself about how cold it's going to be.
All right, let's start with this because I like this conversation. I think we approach it, maybe we have different motivators, but it's the same behavior because there are things which I'm okay, I'm not going to allow that fear or I don't want to do it stop me from doing something for that alone. So I push myself in things I wouldn't do just because I don't want to allow that to have more control of me, which if
Yeah.
someone really knows me, they can manipulate the hell out of me by playing those games. But the one place, I mean, maybe the one place that I'm thinking specifically, which I do not feel where that rule, which I just laid out, goes out the door, and it's with the water, with cold water. Like I want to, I like the ocean. Like it's embarrassing how long it takes me to get in the ocean. I just do it just because I'm tired of just like the children are looking at me like, are you ever going to get in? Are you just going to stand there on your knees all day long? I'm like, okay, all right. I got to get hotter. I need to get hotter, but it's the cold water. That's
Ocean's
the one
a
thing.
little bit different because then you also have like the tide and the undertow, and then what kind of deadly predators are lurking around my ankles. So I
That's
might
never crossed my mind. But I think it's different in the Pacific because the tides are the undertow is stronger, generally speaking, and colder in the Pacific than the Atlantic, correct?
the Pacific is a deadly ass kicker of an ocean.
Yeah.
All I'm ever thinking about is like, in which way is it going to kill me today?
Gotcha. Okay. So I've been in the Pacific. I think the last time I was in the Pacific Ocean, I may have been 12. But I've got lots of like Atlantic and like, soft Caribbean Sea. Like I can do that.
Oh, the Caribbean. I mean, I'm such a diehard West Coast girl, and I can like easy slip into like that West Coast is the best thing, but the Pacific is my least favorite ocean. I'm not into it.
Gotcha. It looks nice. It looks nice on film. I'll say that.
Yeah, maybe they're photoshopping it or something. It's
Maybe
like
they're photoshopping it because they
dirty
do a
and
lot.
angry and polluted and mean.
So I'll go loop this back to where we began. So it's like this idea we were talking, or at least I was interested in talking about this idea of like motivation, and often like I find myself I guess it would be like inversion motivation, like the fact that I won't allow the like I don't like it or I'm intimidated by it or anything like that. That's my biggest motivator. And all of that is just my own, like, kind of like my mind fuck, because I want to have this idea that I can't be intimidated or what have you. But I mean, obviously that's not the truth. I just try not to allow that to stop. Now, would you call yourself like, because you said in the beginning, you're like, you've got a reputation, or like people would think that about you, that you're like really brave, or you're really like, but my sense is like, you also want to push up against, you don't want, it's more so the limitation of something that would be scary would be stopping you. And you don't want to be in that. You don't want to be controlled by that, even if it's by yourself.
Yeah, I kind of can't stand that feeling, but at the same time, it's a guiding force for me. Like if I feel fear or trepidation, I have to do it.
Okay.
But because I don't like what that does to my mind, I want to do it as quickly as possible to get to the other side. So like in gymnastics, when it would be like, we'd train all summer vaulting into the pit. And then when the season came, it was like, no, now you're vaulting onto the mat where you could break your neck and die. And everyone would be like, oh, who's going to go first? And I would like cut to the front of the line and just go while they were talking about it. Cause I can't handle that much mental mind fuckery for too long. So like when skydiving, I go first. When I do psychedelics, I'm like, give me 12 times as much so I don't have to have the mental chatter.
All right. So there's not harnesses for the vault? I would think that there would be harnesses.
These days there probably are, but back then it was just like straight up medieval torture.
All right, okay. Like imagine like Romania in 1960. What were they doing? Like my guess is like you either get executed or you become a gymnast or die trying to become one.
Yeah. And you get stronger. Like Emily broke her neck. Like we all broke things. Oh yeah. Like you'd crash, land on your head, couldn't breathe. And it was like, did they break their neck? Are they gonna die this time? That was kind of every day in the gym. I don't think it's like that anymore.
Okay. Yeah, they're too soft, and they've got too many of the contraptions to help. How about this? How much pain can you handle?
Way too much.
Okay, I got that too. I have a really, really high threshold of pain.
Yeah. So do you find, I find it dangerous that I can handle so much pain because I don't realize that things aren't serving me or aren't aligned or shouldn't be this painful because I can handle it.
Are we talking emotional pain now, or are we talking physical pain, or both? I mean, is there a
All of the
difference?
above.
All of the above. I think you're either a masochist is the one who likes the pain, right? Or and the sadist likes to give it. I always get that backwards.
I'm coming to terms with the fact that I have aspects of both.
I could see. I don't think that I dish out a lot of pain, but I think there may be people who would argue that point with me.
And again, are we talking emotional pain?
I don't know. You can go either way. This is a family show.
Do you see downsides to your high tolerance for pain?
Do I see? Yeah. Yes. I also see upsides. I mean, the downside is not necessarily, like, maybe I think this is what you said, like not necessarily recognizing when something's not serving you and is actually harming you.
Yeah.
And the pain thing goes hand in hand with what we talked about earlier, which is like, or at least I did, about not wanting to be intimidated. Like how, like I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be pushed around by fear or intimidation or threat of pain or something like that. So from the combination of those two, like, yeah, that probably, like in some ways, like, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Yeah, there's a truth to that. And then there's a lot of things like, wow, I probably could have avoided a whole bunch of shit.
Totally. Did you see that as part of your like project programming? I know different people had different, like sex was used to control and that kind of trauma-based mind control. I think in my case, it was all pain and like physiological torture.
Mine, maybe a little bit of everything, but definitely psychological, emotional discomfort.
And have you since transmuted that, or like how do you work with that now as a grown-up?
How do I work with that as a grown-up?
And do you
I would say that. I'm sorry?
Do you identify
Say
as
that again.
Do you identify as a grown-up?
Do I identify? Yes, that's my pronoun. My pronoun is grown-up.
Okay,
grown
awesome.
Up. You could call me grown-up. I get. So I would think the ability, particularly nowadays, like where we are in life and culture and reality right now, like I think people who can handle a lot of like psychological and emotional discomfort, like did not have in some ways, a lot of the changes were not that big of a deal. So stuff like that, it served me. I've been in a lot of like unusual situations where it's not even like, I don't even like something like, and this is a real simple thing, like I can understand conceptually how walking into a party by oneself and not knowing anyone could be really intimidating to some people, or walking into a bar. I really like those sort of like uncomfortable social situations. Like I'm a really social person, but I like to be, I don't like to go to bars with people, but I'll go to a bar by myself where I don't know anyone, and like usually like a dive bar. Like that's my favorite. And I just like will sit there, like just like the weirdo. Like, and so that could be, I guess, to some people uncomfortable. To me, it's not. But yeah. Maybe I've been in relationships longer than I should have been, which have been uncomfortable. That's probably something which hasn't served me. But like, who's to define serves or not serves?
Totally. I mean, I think in that instance, the way I see it, and my guess is that this would apply to as well, is that like I've expanded the boundaries of my comfort zone pretty wide. So it takes me longer to realize that something isn't comfortable because of that capacity. And I see that in relationships for sure.
That's a good way to, like, how I think that's how it's affected me as a grown-up, is that, like, it's the tolerance for discomfort is enormous.
Yeah. And I think that's a superhero power. I also think it's interesting that you said that you do identify as a grown-up. Because I think for me, one of the defining capabilities that discerns a child from a grown-up is the ability to be by oneself and be comfortable. And I definitely think that entails going to parties by oneself, going to restaurants, going to bars, and being confident in that. And plus, like, I just think it's more fun to go to social events by myself because I can be anything I want to. I can stay as long as I want. I can be a freak. I can be a wallflower. Like, there's just more freedom in how I choose to show up.
Yeah. I think I want to go back to the grown-up identification. That probably comes from the fact that, you know, as a father. And so that's a role which I take very I take very seriously, that responsibility, not just with my own children, but with all children. So like that would be kind of like the grown up. Like I relate very, very well to I mean, this is the litmus test. This is the litmus test of any human being: children, animals, and old people, because you can't bullshit any of them. And if you as a general human being can connect with all three of those groups, you know, that says something at least about authenticity. But I relate very, very well with young people and with children. But I certainly do that. Like, I show up like I'm a freaking grown up and you're a child. And I don't treat you like I understand. In my mind, I think I have a very clear understanding of what that dynamic is. And that's not like a power dynamic as much. I mean, it is a little bit, but not so much like you do what I say sort of power dynamic. But from that idea in terms of the continuum, I mean, I value, like, if you're older than me, particularly if you're like a decade older than me, like off the bat, I'm just going to have to, I respect you, like, just because you got like more mileage on your tires. I know we don't like to use the age thing, but they've got more experience in this body skin. And so it's like, I think that there's a value. I value that, at least within, you know, just being here is not easy. And if you've done that, you know, there's a respect which I would give someone, and I hold that within myself. It's like, you know, I've got experience and I've earned it. You know, I've earned my scars. Like scars, I love scars. Yeah, like those are the best parts of my. Yeah, this is funny. Those are the best parts of my body.
Well, I like scars because it goes back to authenticity. And it's like, this is the story of my earth walk. And it also indicates like courage and like putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations to have earned those scars. I have a lot of scars. And in my 20s, I was dating this like Swedish Playboy supermodel. And he was just
sounds
like,
awesome. Give me his number.
That kind of good looking, that's just like ridiculous, like over the top, and everyone wanting a piece of him. And not to be too graphic, but like we dated a couple times. It was our first time fooling around, and he saw my scars.
80s, right?
I don't have that many sunspins. But the first time he saw my scars, it was like the heavens parted, and it was like law, and he loved me like 1,000 times more. Like the scars were the thing for him that like really pushed him towards me. We ended up dating for 5.5 years, and I don't think it would have happened without the scars.
Scars say a lot, but particularly, I mean, I'll just speak from my perspective of like being a man, is like when you like a pretty woman with scars, like there's something about that dichotomy, which is quite, you know, it's that polarization, that magnetism. So now I'm curious, where's your scar? What is your Swedish? What is this? Where? You don't have to show it. You don't have to show it.
I had a breast reduction.
So
they're
would that
big.
be under the breast? Like, you don't have to show me that, but now I'm trying to picture it.
Yeah, let me flash the whole world. It's under and then up and then around, but I'm also a chelator. So my scars are all like.
I don't know what a chelator is.
So chelation is like where the scars get kind of like mottled and extra thick. I love this because anyone who ever watched my show who may have had a crush on me, like now they're gone. It's a lot.
I don't know. I just told you, like people like scars. They might be even more intrigued.
It's a lot of scars. Plus all the ones from gymnastics, like 4 operations on my wrist and a couple on my ankle and like all of those.
All right. I'm gonna tell you, I've had stitches. I've had stitches 3 times. All right.
Okay.
And they're all they're all tied to my mother in a weird psychological, like shaping my inner world sort of way.
Do tell. Let's unpack this.
No, let's unpack it. All right. So let's see the first one I have. Can you see this like right on the bridge of my nose? Like if I go like that, you can see that line right there.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a good one. So that was from, so they called me as a child. My name was Kiefer. They called me Kiefer.
Is that your given name?
No, I don't know why they call me Kiefer, but so anyway, so little baby Kiefer, that would be me, takes his first steps. Right? Very exciting. Like baby takes first step. Look, it's baby Kiefer. He's taking his first step. Bam, right into a coffee table. Split right here, blood like just pouring down.
First steps? That's first so major. Like, just think of it. I mean,
put that juxtaposition together. What's mom doing to baby?
Right.
Like on one hand, like I'm so excited because baby's walking, showing like stepping into the world. On the other hand, like, holy shit, like baby steps into the world and like this happens.
Right. Like first attempt towards like independence, autonomy, face full of blood.
All right. Face full of blood. All right. Number 2, this like when I start to like look at this like as a continuation of a story, like I'm like, okay, this is, and I think this may tie into like a lot of the other things which we were talking about earlier in terms of like emotional discomfort and stuff like that. So I'm 5 or 6 years old, and I was born in Columbia, Maryland. All right. And I want to go there, like maybe we'll bring that up a little bit later in this conversation, because it's interesting because of its relationship to the NSA and the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center. It's like right in the middle, right when they're doing all of their types of projects on young children. But anyway, so I'm 5 years old.
Definitely bookmark that.
Yeah. So 5 years old, we moved from Columbia, Maryland to Richmond, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And this is probably, this has got to be mid-70s, okay?
Okay.
And so mid-70s, cell phones, 0 except for time travelers. If you're not a time traveler, you have no cell phone. Mm-hmm. So we move in there. For whatever reason, I don't think my father was part of the move. Like it was done for his job, but he wasn't there that first night, like moving trucks, like they did all that sort of stuff. And we move into the house. It was me, my sister, and my mother. I'm 5 years old. And for some reason, I'm sleeping in a bed, my bed in my bedroom. And the room isn't, I guess, all set up. And there's a nightside table. And on my childhood furniture, because my parents, not learning from this experience, decided to get me furniture with brass reinforced corners. So like imagine like it's kind of like a cube, and on that cube there's like brass all around, so it's like really, really sharp. And somehow I fall out of the bed, and somehow my leg gets caught in this like corner, and there's this huge gash. Like the scar is ridiculous on my leg, but it happens like it maybe in the middle of the night. No telephones hooked up in the house. No cell phone. My father's not there, and we don't know the neighbors yet. and it's like the middle of the night, and my mom doesn't know where the hospital is, can't call like an ambulance, and there I am, like, you know, is like a young child bleeding and screaming on the first night of our move.
You have this thing with the firsts, like it's so interesting. Yeah, the timing of these gashes.
Right, like, and I don't remember. I only know those stories because that's like part of family history. I mean, there's a very good chance. Like, I mean, I'm open to possibilities. I go by probabilities, but I'm open to possibilities. So it's very possible that the stories I told you have just been post-hypnotic implants placed from, but I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's the case. I think it really did happen. So then the third thing that happened, I may have been I think I was a sophomore. No, I was a freshman. I was a freshman in high school. And so I used to play
again with these firsts. Freshman, first year of high school.
So it's freshman. And so it was an interesting high school. So I'd since moved back to Columbia. So this is really weird. Born in Columbia, lived there for a handful of years, moved to Richmond, lived there for a handful of years, moved back to Columbia. And then I went to college in Richmond, which for whatever reason. So yeah, I don't know. So I was back in Columbia. I went to like middle school, like other people went to. And in my 8th grade, so in 9th grade is when high school began, there was a change of school districting.
Okay.
Which I don't think happens very often, but I mean, I didn't know at the time because it's just like, it's just like a middle school kid. And
was that when they were doing all the busing to like kind of redistribute the classes? That was such a big thing in like late 70s, 80s. So Columbia's different. All of Columbia was a large scale social sciences experiment. Like, I mean, it was real, like people really lived there and they had like real lives, but like the setup, like this is the conclusion I came based upon all of the research, following the money, my experience growing up there, seeing its location, seeing who the people involved, like it's a pretty easy conclusion to reach. But so I don't know if this was part of that or not. Whatever it was. So I went from 8th grade to all of a sudden I had to go to a different high school. And in my like kind of like social group, I suppose, like all of my friends were going to the high school I always thought I was going to go to, and I was going to go to this other high school. So I'm going to a high school and I don't know anyone. Right. Well, actually, so in that, I guess, August, like I played soccer, and that's a fall sport in the East Coast. I don't know if it is like other places, it's different. So that would mean that before school began, there was like tryouts for the team and all that sort of stuff in August. And this was before school started, before I became like a freshman, an official freshman. And it was like one of like the preseason or whatever practices, and it was rainy out, blah, blah, blah. And the in-ground sprinklers, like it's kind of like flat. So because the ground was all wet and muddy, like that kind of like the ground got down underneath it. And somehow that got underneath my kneecap. Right. In this like, kind of like, it's like one of those things. So I'm taken to the emergency room. And I remember my mother walks into the emergency room. She wasn't there. She was called in to go to it. And I wasn't under anesthesia. They just gave local. And what they had to do, because it was so covered with mud, they were just like cleaning out to see the depth of the thing. And my mom walks in and she's got this look of horror on her face, because she sees her child. She sees her child who took his first step, and she's got looks of horror. And on his first night in Richmond, and like with blood everywhere, looks of horror. And now like a week before his first day in high school, my parents did not want me to go to that high school, something fierce. It was like a bad kid's school. And there I was covered in blood, and she had this look of horror, and I had to yell, "Get out," because I could not stand the way she was looking at me. Right, like way to exacerbate the situation with like more fear, more emotion. You're just trying to keep it together.
This is a great Mother's Day card. Thanks, Mom. Thanks. So anyway, so I guess so let's go and tie this whole thing together, because it's certainly linked, like in terms of like psychological, emotional discomfort, physical pain, being able, like, despite that, to like, okay, I'm not letting that like stop me moving forward. Like, you could see each one of those things, but there's a real like kernel of like something there.
How has this shaped your relationship with your mother, or what does this tell us about your relationship with your mother?
How has that shaped? I've always been close with my mother.
Okay.
Right. If I want to go by an astrological model, I should have a very, very unhealthy relationship with my mother. I have a 12th house moon, which implies like a really unhealthy relation, and it's squared Mars, and I've got like all these things that point to like there's like a lot of mother shit going on.
Right.
And I've thought about that. I'm like, I don't know if I would describe that as my relationship with my mother. And then I'll be like, or would I? You know, maybe like I have a different definition of what I think an unhealthy relationship is. I don't know, but I know that these things have happened. So there's that. So now I'm going to link this. Now we're going to get really good. So you also brought up the question, like, well, how did this fit into your programming, Michael? Michael, when you were in projects, how did this fit your program? So I don't know about that, because a lot of that's been erased, right? But I'm going to tell you this. This is an actual, factual, true account of the history of at least my mother. It was before I was born. How familiar, let me just generally speaking, like, how familiar are you with the history of like government sponsored, military sponsored drug trials on citizens and people like that? Like MK Ultra stuff and like the Department of Defense and all of that. Do you have any of that?
Yeah, let's go with not very, so you can catch us up to speed.
Okay, so one of the more well-known, well-documented of these experiments, long-term experiments, was at Edgewood Arsenal. This took place in I think like maybe even late 50s to early 70s. Okay. Like they were doing lots of I'm pretty certain that it was psychedelics and it was like cannabis, and like, you know, that's just what they tell you about. My mother was the secretary of one of the top scientists who was running those experiments.
Whoa.
And I didn't find that out until 10 years after doing like research, like all into conspiracy and mind control. And I'm talking to my dad about it. And my mom just kind of like floats by this, like she drops this little bomb. She's like, oh yeah, I used to be. And I'm like, what? I'm like, Mom, they always test on the children of the admins.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
So when you say that to your mom, is she open to it, or does she just like go into that like maternal protective, like, no, that never happened, you're crazy?
She's got a good sense of humor, and she's got a real good, like, we've got like a lot of the ways which I see reality do not necessarily line up to how she sees reality. And that's not necessarily a point of friction. Like we meet that in a nice, like in kind of like a fun way. And nice. So it was met that way, like not too seriously. But then at the same time, she's like, well, I don't remember.
That's the key.
So now we're going to go like one layer deeper. My mother, for as long as I can remember, has always talked about her memory. Like has always questioned her memory. I don't remember this. I don't remember that. Like things like that. I never, you know, as her son growing up, I never thought like, you know, I'm like, what do you mean, Mom? Like, you know, I don't notice that, but I recall in my upbringing that was part of her normal sort of like talk track. In light of what she's saying, and then particularly now, like she's certainly, memory has become a bigger issue in her life. My guess, like looking at things in terms of like probabilities. I don't necessarily, I'm not saying for certain that there was something because I was a child of my mother who was a secretary who then seemingly stayed within the military industrial complex throughout her career, never really left that despite the fact that she worked for different organizations. They're going to wipe her memory.
Right.
And if they're going to wipe your memory a bunch of time, there's probably residual effect. And that residual effect is going to show up in someone saying like, I don't know, there's something just kind of off with my memory.
Interesting.
So it's like one of those, like, I don't know how big that blind spot is.
Right.
And it's something I've never really pushed. But I've always held that in terms of like part of the case, to figure out like what the hell happened when I was growing up.
Right.
Like that's certainly like, I've got a big wall with like names and like lines and like connecting everything. And that's certainly on it, like, mom's memory and stuff like that.
Right. Right. For my 18th birthday, my dad sent me a videotape of the Manchurian Candidate. And it didn't line up like
the JFK. That would be the JFK version, right? When JFK, Frank
no, the
Sinatra.
Original. Yes.
Yeah, that was Frank Sinatra. Yeah,
Yes.
not JFK.
And
I got that confused because they were body doubles.
Right. So it didn't it didn't line up. Like I knew there was like tons of the torture and the weird things that happened, and there were like things that happened growing up that I was just like, it didn't make sense that my dad would do those things. Like it just didn't line up with his person. And then growing up like a Jewish American.
When you say do those things, do you mean like behaviors or like job or?
No, behaviors towards me that was just like, what the fuck? Like, why would someone behave like that? It just didn't line up in the positions I was put in. And, like after, like I would work out in gymnastics, like 6 hours a day. I would come home and my dad would give me these massages. They were not sexual at all. My dad did not violate me sexually, but they were incredibly painful. And I was little and I would be like, ow, that hurts. And you'd be like, you need to take it. Don't be a candy ass. And I think that was kind of part of it. And then growing up a Jewish American princess, like I got good presents, like I got good birthday presents. So when for my 18th birthday, I got this VHS tape of Manchurian Candidate, I was just like bratty and like, what the fuck is this? And I did not realize my dad died when I was in college, but I didn't put it together until a couple of years ago, like, oh, he was trying to tell me something. And then I talked to a few different,
At your 18th birthday?
18th birthday.
And that's all you got?
That's all I got. That was it. And I was at college, so he mailed it to me. No card, nothing. Just
was there any explanation? Did you get it
on
the phone?
None.
Okay.
We just kind of ignored it. And then I realized after talking to a few different people about this over the past couple of years that he wasn't trying to tell me about my programming. He was trying to tell me about his programming.
Yeah.
So in terms of memory wiping, he had enough awareness to send me that clue.
Right. All right. Can we get weird now?
We haven't yet. Sure, let's get weird.
That was just like, that to me, that's like cocktail hour conversation. Like that's
right. I have no perspective on what weird is because
exactly. And it's kind of fun because when you surround, this is a slight pivot. When you only surround yourself with people who just talk about like all of the things which none of the other people talk about, you don't realize that other people don't talk that. And then like they look at you in a way which is like, I can't believe you're mentioning that. But that's why like normal people are like people who are around normal people like to talk to probably you and like to talk to me because it's refreshing because they can say anything and like you ain't going to shock nobody. All right.
Totally. Yeah. I have a friend of mine, this was years ago in LA. he like did an intervention and he was like, you can't just talk to random people about all the crazy shit going on in your head all the time. Like you can't walk into a party and start talking about stuff like that. And I'm like, of course I can. I don't think you can handle me, but like, yes, that's how I operate. I talk about the weird shit. But he's very disturbed by it.
If you're cute enough and you got enough scars, anyone they're gonna listen to you no matter what they say. Like you get away with a lot of stuff just on that level in our society. But
yeah.
All right. So we began this conversation, or we began, this conversation. You were asking, you were like, well, walk me through the transitions, the latest chapter. All right.
Yes.
So now we're going to go there, but this is a good setup for it. So how do I want to go and set this up? So I'm going to do a little bit of a refresher.
Okay.
Last year was probably the most unusual year in my personal life, and it kicked off with me giving this presentation to the Freemasons, which immediately the relationship I was in imploded the next day. And 3 days later, I found myself living in Baltimore, right? Mm-hmm. That's what kicked it off. And in my time in Baltimore, a lot of things happened, but one of the things which was most unexplainable to me as the main character in the movie was, how did all of this serendipitous events bring me to a house which was 1 mile away from where my mother was raised and where her mother was, and all this sort of stuff. And I was always intrigued by the concept of my mother's mother in the, I guess, the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And it was much more commonplace than it is nowadays that women would get shipped off to mental hospitals. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother was one of those, and it was in Baltimore. And I'm very aware of the correlation between mental hospitals in this time period and different types of MK Ultra testing and stuff like that. And also in this general area is where what's known what is called the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center was. Are you familiar with the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center? No. So do you know who Stan Graff is? Stan Graff or Stan Groff? Okay, so yeah, holotropic breathing. So totally. He was, before he went to Esalen, so his job before he started getting into that world was he was head of psychiatric research for the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center. And he employed, fresh off of a 5-year stint in the Caribbean, dosing dolphins on LSD, a young John Lilly. So John Lilly and Stan Groff are running the friggin' show of the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center. This is this is where my whole family is. This is where they all grew up. And so I'm aware of all of this. I've got all of these data points I told you on this wall. So that happened. So I'm just thinking about all this. How did I get here? I had artwork, which I've done, which 10 years ago, which lines up too accurately. What's going on? What's going on? Okay. So that happens. And then I find myself, I moved to Nome Countryside. I moved to Nome Countryside in Southern Lancaster. And I'm surrounded by Amish farms. It was a complete, I went from fish out of water of West Baltimore to fish out of water, being the fish out of water in Amish paradise. It's literally this. Do you remember the Coolio song "Gangster's Paradise"? And it was based upon the movie. It's and then Weird Al Yankovic did a parody of it, the Amish Paradise. So yes. I did that. That was my life. I went from Gangster's Paradise to Amish Paradise. And the most interesting thing was the week in between, I met Paradise Gray. Do you know who Paradise Gray is?
No.
Paradise Gray is considered the historian of the golden age of hip hop.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so
when was the golden age of hip hop?
1980s, Big Daddy Kane, Cool Mo. Yeah, there we go. So this is the guy. He was What was the name? Anyway, I met him at this thing, which I mean, it was crazy. But I'm like Paradise Gray and Amish Paradise, like all that. Like I'm watching this unfold, and I think I shared with you like the speech I wrote about for the guy I was staying with, and like how it tied into the Alchemist and all this stuff. So all of that's happening. I'm just like watching it, living my life. I'm like, this has just been a crazy year. So okay, now into like that was just the setup to where I am right now.
Okay.
So early December, it was right on my birthday. So it was
Happy
my birthday,
by the way.
Thank you. Well, I mean, that was a while ago. Your birthday's coming up, right?
It is. And you're a year older today than you were last year. So happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. You're a technician. So it kicked off for me last year because there was an eclipse on my birthday. And like, that's when the invitation from the Freemasons came, the surprise party, all that. So the birthday this year. I get invited to this dinner party. All right. And I did something during the day. And so I go up to this dinner party and I'm in the house, and it turns out the house was built in the 1790s. And when I came into the house, when it was still dark out, it's in a farmette, maybe about 90 minutes from where I was in Lancaster. And it was dark out. I couldn't see the house. And I was kind of intrigued. I'm like, this house was built in the 1700s. Let me go look around. Let me go in. Can I go in the basement? That was the first question. I want to see your attic. I want to see your basement.
Are you looking for treasures, or is it the structures?
Always. Okay. But the treasures means a whole bunch of stuff. I want to go. Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely not looking at the structure, but I am looking to see if there's any carvings on anything, and anything
or like loose floorboards you can lift up.
Like, yeah, like I want to see if anything was bumping the night. So anyway, so this is happening, and 2 years earlier on my birthday, two things happened. I got my first, like, you know how like Emily gets strange messages or letters in the mail I get them too, from the same character. And I got the first one. It came in this it was this poem written about me, and it came in this Freemasonic 33-degree folder. And
like official, like Mason official stationery?
Total Mason official, but you could buy those anywhere. So just because it's official, like you could go on eBay and you could buy them. Like it's not like so, but yes, like for whatever stretch, like someone went to that to at least the amount of effort in order to buy it from eBay. But I also found out this was 2 birthdays earlier. So this who my great-grandfather was, because I was always told from my father that his father was an orphan and we don't know the family line. And I always thought that was strange, because I'm like, but it's the same last name. But what do you mean he's an orphan? But that was just like kind of like the history I was told of my father's, of the Wann last name. And 2 years ago, I was told who my great-grandfather was. Someone sent me a message like, this is your great-grandfather. And I'm like, how the F do you know that? Because I don't know that.
And who's the someone who sent you the message?
That's another conversation.
Is it someone from your family, or is it like
someone who I know?
Okay.
Someone with which there's a lot of myths, a lot of like, I'm uncertain about a lot of things, but this person sends me like, this is who your great-grandfather was. And I'm like, that's not true. And I went to go verify that it wasn't true. And I was able to verify that it was. It was not a difficult thing to go back a couple generations I just took my father's word that no one knows who my great-grandfather was. Okay.
Did he believe that, or was he trying to keep a dark truth from you?
I don't know. Me and my dad are close.
Okay.
And he's nuts. And so like, it could be anything. And I don't think he thinks that way. Like, I don't think that would be my opinion. I would, if I were to say what I think is the most likely, I don't think he cared. So I was able to go and verify that was my great-grandfather. And I was able to go all the way back to the very first Wann in the new world at least as real as ancestry.com is, because there's a possibility everything on ancestry.com is just made up by the same AI machine that like renders everything. So I'm down with that, but I'm like, it's the most real I got. And
Right.
through ancestry.com, I was able, like, it was maybe 4 different ancestry websites. No one had the full story, but I'm pretty good at putting stuff together. I was able to find the very first Wann to come to the New World. And this Wann, he came to Berks County, Pennsylvania in the 1750s.
From?
Germany.
Okay.
All right. And I know what Berks County, Pennsylvania is by theory, like I can identify it on a map, but like I've never been there. And for me, like until like I've actually like breathed the air and felt the ground underneath my feet and so forth, like it's just theory. And so that's how I felt about Berks County. And like I didn't have that strong of a connection that I'm like, I'm going to go and walk the earth of my ancestors. I just thought it was like a cool sort of story.
Mm-hmm.
So this house built in the 1790s is in Berks County. And I'm like, I know my people. And this is my father's line. Remember, my Baltimore story started on my mother's line.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother's line, they're all Ukrainian.
You mean Khazarians?
They're Ashkenazis.
So they're Khazarians.
Uh-huh. And they all came in like late 1800s, early 1900s, like moved to Baltimore, never left Baltimore. Okay. And so like that was like the beginning. Like that was the beginning when I was in Baltimore. So so early December, right on my birthday, I go this guy, excuse me. I go to this dinner party. I find out about the house. The wheels of my head start turning because I'm still like, I'm figuring out this mystery of this past year. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I just know Berks County, PA, but I wonder if I go back because there's a lot of information on these ancestry websites. I'm like, and a lot of it comes from like records. I'm like, I wonder if there's any records that say where in Berks County.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get home, I go and I check. Really wasn't that hard to figure out. And I was able to see when my 8 times grandfather was married and where he was buried. And I quickly put that on like the Google search map. And I put it up against the house I was in. It's about like 4 miles away.
Okay.
All right. So then, life is unfolding. Like there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on in my life. And life was unfolding and blah, 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 this and that. And next thing you know, me and this young woman sign a lease on the very house, which was built in 1750s. That's where I'm sitting right now. I'm actually sitting at the table where that dinner table was. And we signed the lease on the 256th anniversary of the wedding, because the wedding was December 27th, 1766.
Okay.
Right? So like, that's all I really kind of got right now. But I'm like,
wait. Hold up.
Okay.
Who plans a wedding for December 27th? Like that in itself is bizarre. Unless they weren't doing like the Christmas holiday nonsense that we do now then, because that's like a weird no man's land, especially you being the time guy. Like that's kind of a week out of time, but you're inviting people to come celebrate you. Isn't that kind of an odd time? Shotgun wedding? Like why the 27th?
So we've got time, we've got space. Apparently it said they had 19 children. And he died at 55. Jesus. Like I'm trying to do the math. I'm trying to so this all happened serendipitously. Like none of this, like on my end, none of this was planned. But like in hindsight of like, well, whatever happened after this, like Freemasonic thing last year, which then brought me down to my family, my mother's line. to the origins of my mother's line. And then now I am 1 year later, and I'm like, or I'm living in the house. Like I can't say that this is certain, but I've got like an internal, like, I think it's certain. It's like, yeah, there were wands in this house.
Likely, very likely.
I mean, like, it's like, I don't know how, like, I could say like 2-to-1 odds, but I'm like, it's definitely within the realm of possibility. It's definitely within the realm of possibility. Same place, same time frame. I'm here, like, and on this like really weird. So let's get into like strange numbers. Like 256 is a strange number because it's 16 times 16. So if you want to get into like, like mathematics and rendering and simulation or however the world works, like it's all done on numbers. Well, like 16 is 4 squared, and 16 times 16 is like a cube of a cube, which is a tesseract. Tesseract? How do I say that word? Which is the fourth dimension. Tesseract, which is shown as a cube in a cube.
I just want to say I'm reminded of our very first conversation where you're like, I'm not a numbers guy. And I'm like, what? You're the numbers guy. Okay, please continue. We have a tesseract.
So it's like, it's at least tesseract math in my way, in the way I do math, not the way the SATs do math, in the way Mike does math, in the MKWs.
Synchromistic math.
Synchromistic math. So here I am, like on like some sort of like weird, like time, space, like intermingle, like everything is kind of like coalescing, at least from that sort of narrative sort of thing. And so I'm going to add this one last part, and then I'm going to pause because I'm going to let we could go and see where you want to go with this. Prior to knowing about that story of the Wann lineage, because I never knew the Wann lineage, because I'd always been told that like your grandfather who died before you were born was an orphan, so we don't know his lineage. So I went looking for my lineage kind of like half-assed about 5 years ago. And I came across a character in history, at least in Wikipedia history, whatever the hell that is. And his name was Johnny Wann, spelled JOHNNEWANNE. So there's like 2 E's on the end of those names, which aren't seen in current English. And this Johnny Wann, he had the title of King of the Gypsies.
Cool.
Okay. Right. Exactly. So as soon as I heard that, I linked my wagon onto that. I'm like, all right, that's my lineage.
Yeah.
And I started always tongue in cheek. Like, I was never I wasn't ever trying to like convince anyone that this is my lineage, but I'm like, yeah, I'm a descendant of Johnny Wann, and I'll show you like all the information on Johnny Wann. And so Johnny Wann was King of the Gypsies, would kind of, in my understanding, is kind of like being like the head of a different mafioso crime family.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's one of those types of titles. So but they're multiples. There's not just one king. And so he was the king of the Scottish Gypsies, and he was protected by the Sinclair family in Roslin in Scotland. Like this is 1500. So if you know anything about like Roslin Chapel and the Sinclair family, like, yeah, like I'm the gypsy family that was like under their protection. And he like oversaw all of like, they were like the travelers, the tinkers, like these are what they were on. And Johnny Wann, his father, who had a whole bunch, came from a long line. They were all called Fas, F-A-A. And for whatever reason, Johnny Wann came about. I don't know where the Wann name came. He was then the king of the Gypsies, and then it said that he was extradited to the Virginia colony in 1650. I'm like, but you just said, like, I'm reading this in the history book. I'm like, but you said in the 1550s he was the king in Scotland. How is he sent to Virginia 100 years later?
Okay, so how are you rectifying that in your mind?
Time travel. I'm just saying, like I don't put any I'm like meeting it with the softest kid gloves. I'm like, this is kind of fun. Like there's something there, but I don't want to lean into it because I see a lot of people lean into things. I'm like, you shouldn't be leaning that hard, my friend. And